This Sunday, on episode 14 of on Dependency, where every life is a biography.
From a student and cadet at St. Mary's College to commanding officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment to Chief of Defense Staff.
My number is 0008. I joined the Army before independence in 1962, and I retired in the rank of Major General, the first Major General we ever had. I served 33 years with the colors.
This Sunday on Dependency, Garth and Natasha pay tribute to Major General Ralph Brown, who has marched off the parade square for the last time. Join us as we remember this soldier and patriot who played significant roles in two national crises, the 1970 military mutiny and the 1990 attempted coup. Listen live from 10 a.m. on I-95.5 FM or watch live on the on Dependency Facebook page or YouTube channel. on Dependency. We don't just share stories, we change lives.
This Sunday, on episode 14 of on Dependency, where every life is a biography.
From a student and cadet at St. Mary's College to commanding officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment to Chief of Defense Staff.
My number is 0008. I joined the Army before independence in 1962, and I retired in the rank of Major General, the first Major General we ever had. I served 33 years with the colors.
This Sunday on Dependency, Garth and Natasha pay tribute to Major General Ralph Brown, who has marched off the parade square for the last time. Join us as we remember this soldier and patriot who played significant roles in two national crises, the 1970 military mutiny and the 1990 attempted coup. Listen live from 10 a.m. on I-95.5 FM or watch live on the on Dependency Facebook page or YouTube channel. on Dependency. We don't just share stories, we change lives.
On I-95.5 FM.
And streamed live on the on Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Major General Ralph Brown, a distinguished soldier, beloved father and grandfather, passed away on the 29th of March 2024 at the age of 84. Born on the 12th of March 1940, he leaves behind a legacy of honor, service, and love. Ralph Brown dedicated his life to the service of his country, Trinidad and Tobago. He served with distinction in the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment, where he rose through the ranks to the esteemed position of Major General before retiring in 1995. His commitment to duty and leadership inspired all who served alongside him. Beyond his military achievements, Ralph was a devoted family man. He is survived by his loving son Gary Skeen and wife Myrna Skeen. He also leaves behind Gary's mother Joycelyn Skeen and his cherished grandchildren Simeona, Braxton, and Sebastian Skeen, who brought him immeasurable joy and pride. Ralph was preceded in death by his parents Alfred and Mary Brown, as well as his brothers Cyril, Frederick, and Roderick Brown. He is survived by his sisters Marjorie Romea and Cynthia Brown, and his brothers Kenneth, Victor, and Peter Brown, along with numerous family members. A public viewing will be held on Sunday, the 7th of April, today, between 3:30 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. at Belgrove's Funeral Home, 10 Orange Grove Road, Tacarigua. A man of unwavering faith and integrity, Ralph's life will be celebrated at a church service on Monday, the 8th of April 2024 at 10:30 a.m. at All Saints Church, located at 13 Queen's Park West, Port of Spain. His memory will forever remain in the hearts of those who knew and loved him. Following the church service, please join the family for a regimental parade with full military honors starting at the corner of Western Main Road and Long Circular Road. In lieu of flowers, the family requests that donations be made to Trinidad and Tobago Heart Foundation in Ralph's honor as a testament to his spirit of generosity and compassion. Major General Ralph Brown's legacy of service, love, and sacrifice will continue to inspire generations to come. May he rest in peace, and the link for streaming will be shared once it is sent.
Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, and welcome to Dependency. Right here on I-95.5 FM, live on the Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel. Thank you very much, Natasha. Storm and Tom is still with us. Welcome, one and all, to this tribute to a giant of a man in every sense of the word. Mm-hmm. I've served under this gentleman, and some of you will recall, and some of you will be hearing this for the first time, when he gave his testimony on 1970, where he was, what he did, what his reaction was, and what resulted from his intervention or his participation in bringing some answers to this country in 1970 mutiny. And so Natasha prepared some pictures to add to the story so that those of you who can join us on Facebook and YouTube, you can actually take the journey with us, with the Major General. Very detailed, very analytical man. And you will hear from the interview, and then following which you will hear when he sat in studio with us, you will hear and see when he sat in studio with us for 1990, which he played a more significant role as a patriot, as a soldier.
Bringing that madness to an end.
You will hear all about that too as well. And I'm sure you would learn some interesting things that you probably overlooked. And because he speaks about the entire experience and involving even civilians, Canon Ollie Clark, just the name of, one of them. Following which, we'll give him a nice send-off with the precision drill display that was done for our Jubilee by the Combined Forces on Independence morning. So those of you who didn't see that, you'll get a chance to see it again. And remember that for the Jubilee, there was a precision drill done by a combined team of law enforcement officers at the Savannah, and led by Chief Petty Officer Jarrett, and female sailor. It was a nice display, so we're going to send him off with that display. Of course, we must play the last post for him. And then we'll ask you to join us to give your testimony, especially those of you who would have served in the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force under Major General Ralph Brown, retired, now deceased. Like I said, he played a significant role in my life too as well, one that helped me to understand where I was, what I had to do, and what I had to do to return to civilization, so to speak. So we have a very interesting and educational program for you this morning. Please join us, Natasha.
Yes, we are privileged to have interviewed the Major General during his lifetime, and to hear about his experience in the military as well. And I know, as one of the first batch of members of the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment in 1962, he's a foundation member of the regiment that we have today. So in light of that, we are happy to present this tribute to him on his passing.
Yes, and is Ralph Brown, as you will hear his number, 0008. Think about that for a moment. Let that sink in. 0008. And so Ralph helped build the regiment.
Yep.
And so let's go to a break. And without further delay, remember, you can join us on Facebook and YouTube to take this journey. You can send in your message, because the family is listening, I'm sure. And we thank Leslie and Bozel too, who is very close to the family, for keeping us updated. And we will share the information to you again as
Yes,
to the
before we leave.
yes, the viewing and of course the funeral. All right. So, and of course, then you will hear from a young soldier. Well, he's no longer a young soldier, but he and Colonel Brown, excuse me, Lord, Major General Ralph Brown. Well, he probably was colonel at the time, but they were involved too in another national issue that went over a lot of people's heads. And I'll give you a hint. Remember that sting operation, for want of a better term, that was executed by members of the regiment during the time of Joey Ramaya. And one soldier was approached to take his to execute Joey, and he refused. And what ensued from there was a whole something made for a Hollywood movie. But there was a sting operation set up at the Cipriani statue, and they had to collect the money. And because the soldier was offered some money to execute Ramaya, and he refused. And you know that's one soldier who will go down in history as one who is a true patriot himself, and was not easily bought because he was offered a substantial amount of money to take this man's life. Instead, he stood in front of the Major General, told him what happened, and everything else, as they say today, is history. So, and he's listening to us. Well, good morning to you, sir, and thank you very much for sending a little testimony too on your interaction with the Major General.
And we may get into, at the end of the program, some of the changes to the forces that have happened over time. I don't know if you want to get into that, God, but in terms of what you have and others may have noticed about how the military has changed since the departure of some of these old soldiers.
Well, I mean, to set it up nicely for you all, Major General Ralph Brown, deceased, was one of those soldiers who lived and wanted us to live military. See, that era of Joe Theodore, and when you hear names like Joe Theodore and Ralph Brown and Leonce and Miles and all of these, you know, officers and senior NCOs, they laid a foundation for soldiers. You couldn't be nothing else under them. But what was significant about them? They were fathers and in some cases grandfathers. And so they mentored. So even though Major General Ralph Brown was responsible for me being discharged, when these officers pulled you up, you didn't have them off, as we say. You didn't hold them in mind. Well, at least not for me and some of my colleagues. We saw them as fathers. We saw them as parents. And they instilled a certain level of a certain value in us that stayed with us for the rest of our lives. I am one of them because I got tools from the Defense Force to survive on the streets and in prison. It's a very, very important institution. So we could discuss that later on. So let's go to a break, and when we return, we start the journey with retired Major General Ralph Brown as he gave his account of 1970, what he had to do, and how it all ended. You're listening to Independency. Remember, you can join us on Independency on Facebook or YouTube to follow us and get educated here this morning. So we take a break and we'll be back.
My advice for kids, for young people who are using these products: if you haven't started, please don't try, please don't start. There's a tremendous amount of curiosity about them, but we can't tell you if you're the kid who's going to become hooked after your first few puffs. For kids who've already started to use these products, it's a great idea to try to get yourself off of them. And there's many ways to do that. There's actually a new text-based program that's called This Is Quitting that is put out by the Truth Initiative, and that's a program that's available for free. It is a social media-based program. People could use it to try to help themselves get off of these products. If you are having difficulty getting off of them all by yourself, you can reach out to your physician, see if they can help you with nicotine replacement therapy, which may be of help for people who have serious addictions and are having trouble getting off of them.
Cappy, talk to you now, boy. Got a small work for you to do. You make a quick 10 G's. What you gonna do for me?
10 G's? What's that how I do this, boy?
What you doing? Taking your boat, run up the islands, pick up some people and then bring them back here for me. That's all you have to do.
That sounds like human trafficking, boy. That's a serious crime. I can't make that.
Trafficking in human beings is a serious violation of a person's human rights. It violates a person's right to freedom of movement, freedom of choice, freedom of speech, and freedom of identity. It is a heinous crime which affects local, regional, and international peace and security. A victim of human trafficking is subjected to many types of abuse. The crime destroys a person's dignity and self-worth. Victims often feel hopeless, are suicidal, and are stigmatized in their communities. Child victims are deprived of their rights to education, play, and social interactions. They're essentially robbed of their childhood, and that can never be regained once those years have passed. If we do little or nothing to fight against human trafficking in our country, we can face economic sanctions from international agencies and partners. Our country will be losing money. Doing little or nothing to fight against human trafficking will tarnish our country's international image and, most of all, the value we place on human life. Human trafficking is no respecter of persons. Anyone can be a victim. So let us all strive to safeguard human life and dignity in Trinidad and Tobago.
We are the Counter-Trafficking Unit of the Ministry of National Security, Trinidad and Tobago, safeguarding human life.
Ion Dependency with Garth and Natasha.
Reality radio, at its best, where every life is a biography.
Sundays at 10 a.m. and exclusively on 95.5 FM.
And streamed live on the Ion Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel.
All right, thanks for staying with us. For those of you tuned in on I-95 and online on Facebook and YouTube, welcome. Now we're going to go straight into the first part of our tribute to the late Major General.
Before we do that, sorry to have cut you.
No.
To respond to Adam, yes, I do wear this jacket very often. When I wear it, it's in tribute to fallen ones, or it's a jacket for the Trinidad and Tobago Armed Forces Veteran Association. But apart from which, I was saying to people that I was saying to you all before we went to the break that there was an era of individual that we trained under, and then of course not forgetting our instructors like Modest and when there are certain names, when these names are called, it's from an era where these fellas didn't play. And so that way they brought strict soldiers up. Derek Alfonso, Salandi, Alexander Theodore, Antoine Dallip, Anthony Philip Spencer, Archie Phillip, Dylan, Bishop. All of these folks, they played a significant role in our lives.
Yes.
And we're really grateful for that and the tools that we got. So without further ado, let's go to 1970 and hear what the Major General had to say about that and how he responded. I want to thank Natasha too.
My number is 0008. I joined the Army before independence in 1962, and I retired in the rank of Major General, the first Major General we ever had. I served 33 years with the colors. When we moved into Tetron on the 7th of September 1960, we rented civilian trucks to move from the St. James Barracks where we were located. A lot of people don't know, but the regiment was located at St. James Barracks prior to independence in 1962.
With respect to 1970, could you tell us where were you on that day and what role you played?
Well, I was not in Trinidad when the mutiny took place in 1970. I was actually in Canada doing a company commander's course. And I was at Gagetown when on the television news that night, imagine here I am sitting in the officer's mess together with my other colleagues who were on course with me, and I look at the television and there were images of a few buildings in Port-au-Prince on fire. We had a black and white TV in the mess, and I sat there looking at this thing, For the first time, I'm seeing what was happening. Some of my colleagues tried to cheer me up because it was a rather sad moment indeed for me. The following morning, early in the morning, I went to the commandant of the camp, Colonel Peacock, and I said to him, "Sir, I wanted to get home." Now, he clearly had information, and he looked at me and he said, "Do you know what's going on in Trinidad?" And I replied, "No, sir, but there seemed to be a problem in Trinidad and I need to get home." And he said to me, "Look, you stay right where you are until you can find out what was going on, then we could discuss it." So I reluctantly left, rather dejected, and I continued with the course. On the Friday night, we were on an exercise out in the boondocks way up in New Brunswick, which is north of Canada, and in April it was deeply cold. And a message came over the radio that I was to get in touch with the camp, the main camp, which was about 30 or 40 miles away. The directing staff gave me a driver and an APC armored personnel carrier. And he said, "When you go there, you'll see a telephone." Well, off we went. I got the grid and I worked my way towards this location, and I'm looking around. Where's the telephone? This is in the middle of what we would call in Trinidad jungle. And I saw a square piece of concrete with a handle on it. And when I lifted it, there was a telephone in there, a red telephone. I still remember it. I picked it up, and that automatically put me onto the operator engaged now. The operator said, "Hold on, sir, and your High Commissioner would like to speak with you." So I held on, and she got him on the line. And it was Mr. Matthew Ramcharan at that time. He was the Trinidad and Tobago High Commissioner to Canada. And he said to me that I should return to Trinidad. And he had made arrangements for me to leave on a BWI flight leaving Canada at 7 o'clock on Sunday morning. And then he gave me a rather strange instruction that I should go to Camp Borden, which is 60 miles south of Toronto, where Lieutenant Brizan was then doing a support weapons course, and that I should give him an order to return to Trinidad with me, and he had made arrangements for the 2 tickets. All I need to do is to go to the BWI counter at the airport and find my way back to Trinidad on Sunday morning. Well, I did what I was told. I went back to the foxhole in the ground, told the directing staff my instructions, and he said yes. In the meantime, they said they were sending a staff car for me. I went out to the main road, and true enough, there was a staff car waiting for me there. It took me back to the base camp where I packed. And the following morning, I took an aircraft from Fredericton Airport down to Toronto Airport. And another staff car was waiting there for me, picked me up and took me to Camp Borden, where I got in touch with Rizal and told him he was to return to Trinidad with me the following day. I stayed with an uncle that I had up in Toronto at the time, overnight, and then both of us went to the airport. Well, we got on board the BWI flight, and I asked the air hostess who was there if she had any newspapers. And she brought me the Independent and the Guardian. And I asked David which one he wanted, and he said anyone. Gave it to him, and there I saw where Shah and LaSalle and the others had put down their weapons, and that Brigadier Serrett was returned as the commanding officer. Now, Brigadier Serrett had left the army in 1968 under rather strange circumstances. There was a lot of speculation as to why he was relieved of his command, and Colonel Stanley Johnson took over. That was when I became the adjutant. So then I returned to Trinidad, and Brizan was taken into custody. He had apparently written a letter. There was a suggestion that he was disappointed that they waited so long after he had left to do what they had planned to do. So that letter was intercepted. He was charged with mutiny without violence. And he was court-martialed, and he got 2 years. And regrettably, he's the only person from that incident that served 2 years in prison for it. A Land Rover picked me up and took me straight to St. James Park. That was where Josh Serrett had set up his headquarters, not in Tetron, and he had taken over. And in fact, I didn't go home. I had to send home, get it. We stayed there for a little while. But one of the things when I met Brigadier Serrett, I was handed about 200 statements that Superintendent Mark Phillip, who was the head of the CID, had taken after Shah and LaSalle, and them had given themselves back to Serrett, and they had been taken to the Royal Jail in Frederick Street. And I was given these 200-odd statements and asked to take a summary of evidence. Now, because those statements were taken not under oath, a summary of evidence in the military is akin to the preliminary hearing before a magistrate, where the evidence is reduced to writing, and then charges are formulated. So I set about that. It took a long time, because I had to get these witnesses, and the summary of evidence was actually taken in the Royal Jail. There were 3 sets of courts-martial. The leaders, I think it was 13 of them, Shah, LaSalle, and Bazi, and others, were first. And I took the summary, and charges of mutiny with violence and other military offenses were laid against, it might have been about 50 or 60 soldiers or more. They were tried in 3 different courts martial. The first one was so-called ringleaders, Charles Salbazi and a couple others, and the others 2 batches with lesser degree involvement in the mutiny itself. Now, what happened was, Brigadier Theodore, who at the time was a major, I was a captain. I was in Canada doing a company commander's course, and he was in England doing senior staff college. And the 2 of us were the only 2 officers outside and were not involved in the mutiny, either as Sean LaSalle and Bazi were charged, and the others were all witnesses. So there was nobody to try them for court-martial, because the law at the time, the Defense Act, said they should be tried by officers of the force. And Brigadier Theodore and myself were the only 2 people on the outside. And I took the summary, so I couldn't, and he alone couldn't sit as a court-martial, because they needed 5 officers to sit on the court-martial. So what the government did, they amended the Defense Act to allow for Commonwealth officers with a similar jurisdiction to ours to sit on the court-martial. And that is how Colonel Danjuma was the first officer on the court-martial. Lieutenant Colonel Achampong from Ghana, Obituary, I think, was from Uganda, and 2 others. One was from Guyana, and the other one was from Sri Lanka, which was Ceylon at the time. The court-martial sat every day for, I'm talking about a month or more, which was set up at the town hall in Port of Spain. Before the trial took place, there was a lot of objection from various people as to Colonel Danjuma sitting on the court-martial. And it was brought out where Colonel Danjuma was alleged that he was involved in the mutiny that took place in Nigeria. Quite apart from that, Mills Odoy was the Judge Advocate General. So even the Advocate General in the court-martial was not a local guy. And I suppose they wanted to be fair to everybody. Now, I was the military advisor to the prosecution, which was led by Queen's Counsel Bruce Croker. There's Manalam and Dr. Aeneas Wills and Pope Wharton. I think he defended Bazi. So at the end of the prosecution's case, lo and behold, the defense took a plain bar trial and said, well, you can't try me, because the commanding officer, who at the time was Brigadier Serrett, had condoned the offense on 3 separate occasions. Now, condemnation is akin to amnesty. It meant that the commanding officer told them that he was not going to charge them. Well, there was a trial within a trial, and on one of the 3 occasions, it is alleged that Brigadier Serrett condoned the offense. Was an occasion in the Royal Jail when he and I went into the jail. The soldiers, I think, had rioted one night, and they had taken off the cell doors, and they sent for Joffin and called me and said, meet him at the Royal Jail. And we went in, and we spoke to the soldiers. Well, he did that too. And he told them if they were charged with treason, that he would resign. Back up now, I've said that on 3 occasions, it was alleged that he had condoned the offense. On one of those occasions, that's when I was present. What he said is, if they had been charged with treason, they were to be court-martialed. He would resign, and they asked him to put it in writing. So he asked me to pen this note, and I put in it, if they were charged with a mutiny, he would resign. And he said, no, I didn't say that. And he made me rewrite the note and said if they were charged with treason, that he would resign. And he took the first note I wrote, which said if they were charged with mutiny, he would resign, and he tucked that in his jacket pocket. And well, we left. And it was at the plain bar, they had to put me out of court, and then I had to come back in and give evidence. And when he gave evidence, he produced the old note that I had written. So he must have had some idea that he would need this in some. So on that occasion, at least, they were wrong. Anyhow, the court overruled him, and the trial continued. Shah made a statement from the dock, so he was not subject to cross-examination by Mr. Prokop. And he made several allegations as to what was happening in the regiment at the time. Again, the court overruled it, and no other evidence was left. The court-martial found them guilty. They appealed, and it went to the appeal court in Trinidad, and they upheld the appeal. They said that Brigadier Serrett did condone the offense, and they should be released. The government appealed that decision, and it went all the way to the Privy Council, and the Privy Council upheld the appeal, and Shah and Lasal and Baji and all the others were released. Now, that process took 2 years, and the government at the time released everybody, Shah, Lasal, Baji, and everybody. And that was how it ended, I think, about 2 years later.
Major General retired Ralph Brown's account of his involvement in the 1970 mutiny, and you will note that he hasn't offered any personal opinion as to what what took place. His role was, he was out of the country, he came back, he did his duty as the soldier in charge, or one of the senior officers, and, attended to the court-martial and the trial and all of that. But he never offered his personal opinion on whether his fellow soldiers were in the right or in the wrong. Neither on the catastrophic events that happened on their attempt to exit Tetron. But I suppose...
What I like about him is he was very analytical, very articulate, and very quick on his feet, because when the commander asked him in Canada, you know what going on in Trinidad? His response was, no, I don't know, but something is wrong, and I need to get home. Spoken like a true soldier. He could have been, look, I on course, let them deal with their thing, but no, he decided I wanted to go home, and he came home and did his job. So that's a bit of history for you there, folks, this morning. Those of you who wanted to know what happened on the military side, and we'll be playing some of the excerpts from that 1970 in this month here, because the anniversary coming up of 1970. So those of you who did not hear or was part of that journey when we started it, you'll get a chance again. So welcome to those of you on YouTube. Good morning to you. Thank you very much, Gloria, Rena, and all the rest who joined us. Those of you on Facebook and listening to us on I-95.5 FM. We're going to go to a break. And when we return, you're going to hear another account, this time about 1990. And this is a more detailed, and Ralph, the Major General, was in studio with us. So you're going to see that. You're going to actually see him in the flesh for the last time. He came and he sat with us, and he gave his account of his role and the role of other officers. So you're going to hear more names called of people who played an active role in 1990. And very interesting account as well. So join us. Those of you who are in your kitchen this morning, or washing your car, or cleaning up, or just relaxing. We thank you very much for being with us to pay tribute to this fallen giant, who, I could have seen Ralph as a judge too on the bench. This big imposing figure sitting up there. Yes, he was. And I'm grateful for having served during that time, and I'm grateful for the tools that I got. And I'm sure other soldiers feel the same way too. They weren't perfect people. They were all human, but they were soldiers. And they were mentors. They were fathers. So we thank them for their service. We go to a break, and when we return, you're going to hear, and in the breaks too, please remember you have information. Please pay attention to them. It's not just to go and drink some water. This Sunday we feature in the ills of vape, that vape pen that young people seem to be attracted to, and it's selling like hotcakes, especially I go to a gas station on Richmond Road, and they're all there, full display, in all different types, all different kind of vapes. And anybody could come and buy. There's no question of ID card showing or anything. Anybody can go and buy them. It's unfortunate. So you have information on that this morning, courtesy Ministry of National Security, Counter-Trafficking Unit. We thank them for this opportunity. We'll be back.
When kids are looking to purchase these jewels or these vaping products, if they're 18, they could go to local retail stores, they could go to gas stations, they could go to vape shops. If they're not 18, now they're limited to going to a lot of online places. They ask if you're 18, you click yes, and as long as you have a credit card, you can purchase these. You can purchase from other kids, you can purchase from online auction sites like eBay. It is easy to get these devices. Parents, remember, together we can make a difference.
Hola, my name is Elena. Well, it's actually not my real name. You don't really care, do you? All you care about is once you pay your money to my boss that I look pretty, smell nice, smile for you, and let you have good time, enjoying yourself and doing to me whatever you want to do for the money you paid. What you don't see or know is that I don't get any part of the money you paid. My boss takes all of it. I am forced to work, taking as many clients as my boss tells me to. I am beaten, made to take drugs, and I cannot leave this kind of work on my own. I am a victim of human trafficking. Please, por favor, help me.
Ion Dependency, with Garth and Natasha.
Reality radio, at its best, where every life is a biography.
Sundays, at 10 a.m., and exclusively, on 95.5 FM.
And streamed live, on the Ion Dependency Facebook page, and YouTube channel.
Thank you very much for staying with us. And to those of you tuned in on I-95, thank you. To those of you watching on YouTube and Facebook, hi, morning. Thanks for joining us. Could you please hit the like button on either platform? That would help us tremendously. We have quite a few of you on the YouTube platform. Just hit the like button. Give us a share if you can. And on Facebook as well, like and share the live.
We thank you for your cooperation. I'd say good morning to Nola Pierre, who is listening to us from a hospital bed.
Yes, speedy recovery.
We wish you a speedy recovery, Nola. She's a part of the Dependency family for years now, so we wish you a speedy recovery.
Get better soon.
Her husband was a retired, but he's deceased now, Coast Guard Chief Petty Officer. So get well soon. And so now, ladies, and remember, coming up, we have that precision drill display that was done at the Queen's Park Savannah by the Combined Forces on at our Jubilee celebration on Independence Morning. So if you were part of that, or you know somebody was part of that, let them know we're going to be showing that after this account here by retired Major General Ralph Brown, now deceased, and who will be going home tomorrow, please God, on from Marley Street, from that church there. So those of you intend, and there's a link for the online. You can click online.
Which we will share when we get it. We'll share it on the Dependency Facebook
We
page.
share it this morning. I have it, so I can share it with you. All right, so Ralph Brown visited us in studio here, and he sat with us, Natasha and I. You will see I wear the same jacket, so don't be confused. Because, I mean, he's a Major General, so I had to look the part, right?
Dress appropriately.
So, yes. So, up to this day, they still have us jumpy like that. I'm serious. Up to this day, these men, we talk about that.
Underdressed.
They still have us jumpy like that, you know. So, but let's go. So, here is his account of 1990 as he sat in studio with us on our Dependency. So it's your time now, Major General. You heard this, well, of course, you would not have heard this part of it until later on. And so where were you on that day, and tell us what was your reaction and what you decided to do as the man in charge of the force at that time?
Yeah, well, Garth and Natasha, on that day, I was vice president at the time of the Trinidad and Tobago Football Federation. And Trinidad and Tobago was supposed to play Jamaica in the final of the CFU finals. And I was at the National Stadium, and I did the house announcing for the football games at that time, when at about 6 o'clock, I saw a huge plume of smoke rise from downtown in Port of Spain. I didn't know what it was, but you know the plume of smoke that is associated with an explosion, where it comes out like a mushroom, and
right.
And I saw that, so I realized it must have been something, a pretty large fire. And just about within a matter of a minute or two, Felix Hernandez, Baldy Hernandez, who was the assistant secretary of the Federation, came running up to the announcer's booth. Now, those of you who know Baldy is a pretty hefty guy.
Mm-hmm.
And under normal circumstances, Baldy would not be running up the stadium steps.
True.
So I immediately said, well, something is wrong here. And he barged into the announcer's booth, where I was doing the house announcements, and informed me that the Muslim had blown up police headquarters in Port of Spain. In fact, that was the mushroom that I saw go up when the explosion took place. You see, Baldy worked at TSTT at the time, and Nelson Exchange is on the opposite side to the police headquarters. And he got word over his wireless radio of what had happened. So I left together with Baldy. I immediately left the stadium, and I went to Camp Ogden so that I can probably organize whatever that I had to do. And when I got to Camp Ogden with Baldy and Roy Augustus, I don't know if you recall Roy Augustus,
Yes.
Two of them in tow. At the very moment I drove into the camp, Brigadier Theodore, he who was the Chief of Defense Staff, his car was immediately behind mine. So I realized then, well, there's somebody in charge here, you know. Let me go back to the stadium and see what soldiers I can muster, knowing that Brigadier Theodore was at camp. So he and I had a very short discussion. And I returned to the stadium and I made an announcement on the house system that for all soldiers, sailors and airmen to report to the front of the stadium. And we commandeered, I would think about 30, 40, 50 soldiers turned up, and sailors and airmen. And we commandeered the Caribbean truck that was at the stadium waiting to remove the empties after the football match. And the driver took us to Camp Ogden, and the others who had vehicles made their way to Camp Ogden. By then, Brigadier Joseph, who was a major at the time, he too was in camp at Camp Ogden. And we were able to muster a small group of soldiers. I think it must have been in the 30s, 30, 35 soldiers, and he left to go and try and establish a cordon around the Red House, because as we knew also that the Red House had been stormed by the Muslimin. So Brigadier Joseph went off and at that task. That must have been around 6:30 or thereabouts. And myself and Brigadier Theodore, we were conversing in Camp Ogden as to how we were going to approach this when 7 o'clock came. Now we knew that TTT, which was the only television station at the time in Trinidad, carried excerpts from inside the Red House. And not knowing what was going on, all we knew is that the Muslimin had stormed the building. We didn't know numbers, we didn't know anything else, and that they had blown up police headquarters. And so we thought we would look at the news and see if TTT is carrying any of this thing. And to our surprise, the newscast did not come on as scheduled at 7 o'clock. There was this a sign that came on for the Panorama News, and just the sign was on. And true enough, about 10 minutes later, we saw that clip that you just showed where Abu Bakr said he had overthrown the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And for the first time then we realized that he had taken over TTT. Because, so we now had another situation that has developed. And we had two separate situations. Brigadier Joseph in the meantime had gone out into Port of Spain, and you would not believe the speed with which he was able to set out an outer cordon and then squeeze the cordon in, and he had actually worked his way to within 30, 40 meters of the Red House and had it totally surrounded by 8 p.m. You're talking just 2 hours, literally 2 hours after the coup started, and I would think just an hour after he had left Camp Ogden, little more than an hour after he had left Camp Ogden, to have established a cordon around, a wide cordon, and then to squeeze it in, to work with himself within mere meters of the Red House. And as far as I was concerned, the coup was over at that point in time. There was no way out for them. During that exercise, 3 of our soldiers got shot. Lieutenant Tellisford, Sergeant New, and I can't recall the private soldier's name. Fortunately for us, none of their injuries were fatal, and they were taken to hospital and they were taken care of, very good care in the hospital. But no one realizes that there was actually a gun battle going on, and 3 of our soldiers had been shot. And
this is what a location? TTT?
At the Red House.
Red House.
At the Red House. The TTT, we only knew about it at 7 o'clock news.
Right.
Right? Colonel Vidal was in charge of the 1st Battalion at the time, and his headquarters was also at Camp Ogden, and he too by then had come into camp. And so I gave him instructions that he should muster as many men as he could and then deal with the situation around TTT. The situation around TTT was a much more difficult situation to handle. You know, initially we didn't have very many soldiers, because soldiers were coming in, trickling in. And we had a company of men out in the Ecclesville forest doing marijuana eradication exercise, and they were literally in the jungle, and that it took them several hours before we could radio them and get them to walk out of the jungle, then join the vehicles and get back to Camp Ogden, by which time it would have been around 2-3 o'clock Saturday morning. And then we had what we thought were sufficient men. But in the meantime, soldiers were trickling in and started to come into Camp Ogden.
Well, we have an account of that exercise from W1 Ramnath, who we retired W1 Ramnath. He was on that exercise.
Okay. All right. So then Colonel Vidal had to address his mind to the TTT situation. As I said, it was a much more difficult situation because they were having exchanges between the Muslim who were outside of TTT, and they had also taken over the Radio Trinidad station. All right? And so there were exchanges, and we had to literally fight our way in. And he did not have enough men to establish a wide cordon. So he asked me whether we could get the police to help. And by then also the Commissioner of Police had come into Camp Ogden. So I went to the Commissioner. I said, Commissioner, look, this is the situation.
Who was he at the time, sir?
It was Acting Commissioner Mr. Taylor.
Taylor.
Assistant Commissioner Police Taylor.
Taylor.
He's deceased now, but he was acting commissioner. Jules Bernard was the commissioner, but he was out of the country at the time. So Colonel Vidal, with whatever little troops he had, before he could squeeze in, had established a wide cordon around the thing. I think the Oval, Elizabeth Street and the Oval, Sinclair Avenue, down Maraval Road, not Maraval Road, Cipriani Boulevard.
Okay.
And he did not have anybody to put in Tragreed Road because those were the parameters I had given him. And then once he had done that, then to squeeze in, and had to fight their way in as I was suggesting to you. So I asked the Commissioner, and the Commissioner said yes. So we thought, Colonel Vidal now is on the ground together with Brigadier Antoine, I think, and one or two other Colonel Clark and others. They were junior officers at that time, so they were dealing with that. In the meantime, Brigadier Joseph, as I said, within an hour had the Red House situation under control. But the TTT one, as I said,
Dependency. We pause it here so that those of you just joining us can understand what's going on. What you're seeing on your screen is Major General deceased in studio with us, Natasha and I, to give this account. All right, so thank you very much for joining us. Let's continue with the journey.
Took us some time. I went back to the stadium again while the game was going on, while the Jamaica game was going on, because I knew that the TTT, they were carrying the football match. They were taping the football match to be carried. And so I knew they had outside equipment. Then Abu Bakr appeared on TTT screen. So I wanted to knock him off of the screen because that's the reason he took over TTT, so that he can address the nation and talk. And that's the reason he firebombed 610 radio. And that's the reason he took over the only other radio station that we had. So he would have commanded the airways. So I wanted to get him off of the television in the first place. So I went back to the stadium, spoke with Bernard Pantin, who was the program director at the time. And Bernard suggested, yes, there's a way to do it. He spoke to the technicians. And we said, okay, fine. Collapse your equipment and meet us at the bottom of we were going up to Cumberland Hill. He said that the transmitter station site was up at Cumberland Hill, just beyond Fort George. So I said, meet us at the bottom of Fort George Road to get up to the Cumberland station. And I went back to Camp Ogden, collected Minister Pantin and Minister Myers. And before that, I went personally to Minister Pantin's home and brought him in. He reluctantly came because I was trying to... Abu Bakr had said at that 7 o'clock broadcast that he had, that they were in control and they had taken over the government. But clearly there were ministers who would have not have been in Parliament, who were senators, would not have been in the Parliament itself. So I said, well, all right, let me start bringing them in. So I went to Clive Pantin's home. I knew him personally. And he came with me. And I put him in the Camp Ogden. And to his credit, Minister Myers came by himself. Nobody brought him. He just turned up in Camp Ogden.
Lincoln Myers.
Mm-hmm. And I sent the same Baldy Hernandez and Roy Augustus, and together with Ivan Williams, to find Minister Atwell. Right? He was the Minister of Energy, I think it was. So they went to where he lived in Cascade, and they eventually found him after looking for him for several hours. He wasn't at home. But they eventually found him and brought him in. So we had at least 3 ministers there. And this was later in Saturday morning. Now we're talking Saturday morning. But I just gave you that to let you understand how come Minister Myers and Minister Pantin was able to go with me to Cumberland Hill. So we went to Cumberland Hill. We debused at somewhere before we got to Fort George itself, and then we worked our way on. We went on foot tactically because we didn't know whether he also had, taken over the transmitter site. Clearly forgot that. Right. So we worked ourselves tactically, and we got to the Cumberland Hill, the transmitter site, and we blew they didn't have the keys to get into the cabin, the area where the transmitter equipment was. So we shot that off. We used an SLR. One shot took it off. And we were able to set up use the outside broadcasting equipment the TTT had, filming the football match. Mm-hmm. Put it on his shoulder. And I don't know if you have a clip of that, but most of the television stations have it now because I gave it to them. And from there, first Minister Panting, then Minister Myers addressed the nation. And it's a very hazy picture. It's very hazy. I don't know if you have it, but and then at the end of it, I broadcast and I indicated that, contrary to what Abu Bakr had said at the 7 o'clock newscast, that the army was with him and this one and that, and which infuriated all of us, by the way, who were at Camp Ogden when we saw that. And that, contrary to that, what he had said, that the army we had not collaborated with, nor do we intend to collaborate with the perpetrators of this crime. And I advised them to keep listening, and the ministers from time to time would keep them apprised of the situation as it developed.
So you have clips of that as well?
Say again?
You have that footage too?
Oh, yes.
Okay, because we never saw that footage. And
Oh, no, I gave it, I had, if I would have brought it with me if I'm coming. And actually, the television stations, because they didn't have 610, TV6 and all these other thorough television stations that we have now.
So TTT may have that.
Most of the footage, I gave it to them. They copied it.
Okay.
So that's available.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and we are having a discussion with Major General Ralph Brown, retired of his role and the role that the regiment played at quelling that attempted coup in 1990.
Yeah, so to continue. So in the meantime now, as I said, Brigadier Colonel Vidal was really engaging the Jamaat in an exchange of gunfire. And as TTT was a little more difficult to think than the Red House. The Red House, as I said, by 8 o'clock that was finished. But we were well into Saturday night now, early Saturday morning at sunrise. And about mid-morning, we got a report that the Woodbrook police station was under fire from Jamaat al-Muslimin. And my operations officer at the time was Colonel Derek. I don't know, I'm sure you remember Colonel Derek.
Of course.
of course. He was a major at the time. He was my operations officer. And he hurriedly put together a small posse of soldiers and took off to deal with this situation. And in dealing with the situation, he realized that there were no policemen on Tragreed Road, which is where we had asked the police the night before to hold Tragreed Road for us. And that was how they were able to come out of the cordon, that the other three sides that had been established by Colonel Vidal and his men, and go and attack the Woodbrook police station. And then Colonel Derrick was able to force them to retreat back into the TTT building, and it's then he realized there was nobody, there no policemen on Tragreed Road. Right. So we now had to establish the full cordon. By then, as I said, soldiers were streaming into camp from wherever they were. Most of them, some of them not stationed in outposts, stationed in other camps. They were coming to Camp Ogden because by then they realized that that Camp Ogden was the hub of activity. So we are now into Saturday. The Saturday evening, right, with Colonel Vidal still having this interchange between the Muslimim in the TTT building and in the streets surrounding Marval.
So you're talking about actual exchange of gunfire?
Oh yes, oh yes.
And they were well armed and prepared for a gunfight.
Let's put it this way: they were armed.
They were armed.
It depends on.
They were prepared.
It's all relative. It's all
engage,
relative. Of course, they were prepared to arrange, but not. I'll get to that point at another stage.
All right. Stick a pin.
Yes.
Don't lose your train of thought. You listen to Dependency. We take a quick break, and then return. Those of you who are just joining us, we'll start with that video again, and then we'll continue with Major General Ralph Brown right here on 995.5, and of course you can join us on our Facebook page and Dependency. We'll be back. Stay right
there. We were there on Saturday, but I went to Cumberland Hill a second time together with the acting president at the time, Mr. Eamon Carter. He was the president of the Senate and he was acting president. President Hassan Ali was out of the country at the time. So we did go back to Cumberland Hill where we made another announcement where the state of emergency, 24-hour state of emergency was declared. So we're back to Saturday. We are now on Saturday. And that incident with the police at Woodbrook police station being attacked and how that was repelled. And we now on to Saturday evening. Sometime on Saturday evening, must have been around 8 p.m. Minister Atwell came to me and said he would like me to accompany himself and Mr. Charles Gargano, who was the American ambassador, to Piarco Airport to meet an incoming military aircraft coming from the United States. Mr. Gargano himself was out of the country, but found his way back within 24 hours back into Trinidad, I think via Grenada. He went to Grenada by air and then took a boat and came across and was back in Trinidad within 24 hours of this incident happening. And so I took along Major Derrick with me, who was my operations officer and in fact was my right hand throughout this. He was a tower of strength for me.
And he was in charge of Special Forces?
Yes, at one time he was in charge of Special Forces, but at the time of the coup he was the operations officer.
Okay.
And in fact that Friday, the 27th of July, was his last working day.
Wow.
And he had actually turned in his kit, and he lived opposite the Camp Ogden in Flagstaff Hill. And he had actually turned in his kit when his driver, Corporal Lopez, heard on the news what had happened, that transpired at the Red House.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Never
and
knew
ran back to
get his kit for him.
to Colonel Derrick. And he too came into Camp Ogden. So, but as I said, he was throughout the 7 days, the 6th day, he was my right hand. I depended on him for a lot of stuff because you see, as a Brigadier Theodore was the chief of defense staff, as head of the regiment at the time, we were thinking strategically. All right, and there are others down below who carry out these instructions that we are given. And I had every confidence in the officers in the regiment, and I'm very proud of all of them who reacted. on that occasion. To a man, they reacted. So we are back to Saturday night when I took along Major Derrick with me, and we picked the U.S. ambassador up at the embassy, and Minister Atwell and himself went in the ambassador's car, Colonel Derrick and myself, and we took along an escort to escort the convoy, the 4, 5 or 6 vehicles that we were going in. And we went to the other side of it was the old airport, not this new airport. So the other side was the cargo side, and the terminal was on the southern side. So we went to the other side, and we had to clear the runway because soldiers and the air wing from the Coast Guard had closed Piarco Airport, had physically closed it by putting vehicles on the runway so that no plane could land or take off. So we had to clear that first. And we were looking in the direction where the planes normally come from over the Gulf, from the west, landing at Piarco, when we suddenly heard this roar behind us. It was the aircraft, the aircraft coming from the United States, which landed from the opposite direction.
Oh, wow.
And so the air traffic controller, I suppose, told him to taxi to the northern side of the airport, where we met them. We went aboard, myself, Minister Atwell, the ambassador, and Colonel Derrick, Major Derrick as he then was, went aboard the aircraft. It was a DC-8 aircraft, and our DC-8 is the equivalent of the McDonnell Douglas DC-8 is the equivalent of a 707, a Boeing 707. Correct. It's a wide-bodied aircraft. It holds 300 people. So it was a DC-8. So we went aboard the aircraft, and the front of the aircraft, with what you refer to as first class, now that was configured like an office, very much like we are here, with a desk, and you sat around it. And we were joined there by another guy from the U.S. He was in civis, and we had a discussion. And they asked me whether we needed help. And I said, no, we did not need any help. We can handle the situation. Because by then, as I told you, by 8 p.m. on the Friday, we had the Red House under control. And sometime on the Saturday, we had the TTT situation under control when we realized that the police, when we had established the cordon. And I said no. And so the discussions went on and back and forth, and they must have asked me at least a dozen times whether I needed help. It was almost as if they were begging me to say yes.
They wanted to drop troops down.
And I resisted. I indicated to them that, so eventually I said, well, look, you can help me if you have any eavesdropping equipment.
Right.
Because I would like to know what is going on inside there. And we'll come back to that because I think I skipped the part that Canon Nolly Clark played, and I'll get back. Remind me to get back to that, which began early on Saturday morning.
Yes.
Very early that Saturday morning. So I needed to get some eavesdropping equipment to see if we can pick up on anything that was happening inside the Red House and the television station. And eventually, when they realized that, I was adamant that we didn't need any help. Incidentally, Minister Atwell was also asking me if I was sure that I know what I was, that I didn't need help. They then asked whether if they could allow 4 or 5 of their people to disembark. And I said, yes, I have no objection to that. And the same individual who was representing, I take it, the U.S. government at the time, he came ashore, and four other people, 2 women and 2 men. So there were now 5 of them, and they all came off with radios, military radios, in their hands. So I realized they were communications people, and they can talk on those radios back to Washington, as indeed they were talking. So they came back, the aircraft left, and I gather it staged in Barbados. I went to Barbados. Either Barbados or Puerto Rico, I'm not quite sure which, but I think it was Barbados. And the 5 of them came. 1 stayed with Brigadier Theodore, the guy who I recognize as the leader of the group. He stayed with Brigadier Theodore. I physically inserted 2 of them in the Colonial Life building, which was right opposite the Red House. And the other 2 stayed with me. So the leader stayed with Brigadier Theodore. The 2 stayed with me, and 2 I physically inserted 2 in the Clico building. And so that was the only involvement of the Americans during this. Because once the Muslim had surrendered, within an hour or 2, couple hours, they were gone. The same aircraft came and took them away. So they were here, and I have no doubt that they were passing back information to Washington.
You sure they weren't CIA? If you're just joining us, you're listening to Iron Dependency, and we have in studio with us back then Major General Ralph Brown. You get to see the man in the flesh for the last time, because his going home service is tomorrow morning at the All Saints Church and on Marley Street. So we just giving him a nice send-off. And remember, still to come, that precision drill display that was done at the Queen's Park Savannah, we think is a good send-off, good way to send off the Major General by having his troops do a little, display for him this morning. All right, so that's still to come. Let's go back to the interview.
Well, no, I think they were special forces.
Okay.
I think they were American special forces, but communications people. So, yes, I told you to remind me that to come back to the role played by Canon Nolly Clark. I think when the Muslim in the Red House, as indeed in TTT, realized that the Red House was surrounded and there was no way out for them, and we'll come to the 3 solutions that we had to that problem. We'll come to that later on. When they realized that they were surrounded and there was no way out for them, they asked to have some dialogue with those on the outside, with people on the outside. I think they had shot ASP George. He was killed. He was a special branch officer assigned to the parliament, and he was killed. And they used his radio, I think. He had a radio with him, and placed it to the mouth of the Prime Minister, who had been hog-tied back to back with Mr. Richardson, and ordered him to call the troops off and that's when he's alleged to have made those famous words, attack with full force. Now, we didn't hear that because it was a police radio.
Right.
And at that point, both he and Minister Richardson were shot.
Yes.
And, so they then asked for somebody to come in and they approached me and asked, I think they asked for Canon Nolly Clark, by the way, by name. And at the time, I think Canon Nolly Clark was allied to what was the name of the grouping of trade unionists that was around that time. And so they asked for him. I said, yes, let him go in. Because I wanted to find out what was going on in there. The only way to find was for somebody to go in and come back and tell me. Because all we knew is that they're taking over the Red House. I didn't know what types of weapons they had, how many, what the numbers were, how they were dressed, what they were doing, what they were saying. So I had no objection to Canon Nolly Clark going in. 1 or 2 ministers had objected. A couple of other ministers had also come into Camp Ogden, by the way. And I said, no, let the man go. Inadvertently, he would come back out, he would tell me what was going on in there, and I would have a better idea of what I'm dealing with in terms of the weaponry, what they had, and that sort of thing. And true enough, he went in, and he was just an emissary. A lot of people didn't think that he, thought that he was part of this thing. Canon Nolly Clark, I have no doubt in my mind, was not a part of this thing. He went in, and he came back out. I debriefed him, quite apart from what information he took to the ministers who were on the outside. I debriefed him because I wanted to get some idea of what we're dealing with. And I well recall what he said. He said there's some little boys in there with some big guns. And he put his hand up in the air like that to show that the guns were taller than these little boys. And I realized for the first time that I'm dealing now with rifles.
Yes.
Now remember, I know they had a propensity to blow up buildings and to use remote control to blow up explosives.
Right.
How much of that they may have been put inside the Red House or the television station, I don't know. As a matter of fact, they used it to great effect. If you read Raoul Pantin's book on the coup, you would see that they had wired up a box and told them it was explosives. And as I say, we had this knowledge that they can detonate this thing by remote control.
Yeah.
So Canon Clark, so for the first time now, I know what I was dealing with. We're still in Saturday night now. After we had come back from the airport, Minister Pantin came to me and he said, look, because I was down in one part, if you remember Camp Ogden, Garth,
yes,
the offices at one way and then there's an officers' mess down at the other end of the same building.
Yes.
So the ministers were down there and I and Brigadier Theodore, we were on the office side of things. And Minister Pantin came to me and said, that a lot of the ministers didn't agree with the situation, that how the thing was going on. Because I had recommended that we try to resolve this thing with as less bloodshed as possible. And I recommended that they negotiate a way out of this thing. Because by then it had become a hostage situation.
Yes.
Bilal knew he was surrounded. He had the ministers in there. Right? The TTT building, we were still working our way toward it. And Abu Bakr asked to speak to Archbishop Pantin, of all people. And so I asked Minister Pantin if he knew where his brother was. He said, yes, he just spoke to him, he's in Archbishop's house. So I sent a posse, a patrol of soldiers, and brought him in. We brought him into Camp Ogden and said, put him in the officer's mess there. And then I said to myself, well, the next person they will call for is Bishop Abdullah. So I sent another group of soldiers to find Bishop Abdullah, which they found him, and they brought him into Camp Ogden also. And Dean Nolly Clark had gone in. So when Minister Pantin came to me and said that he didn't think that, a couple of his colleagues didn't think that this negotiation thing was going to work out, and, that we should think of another way of resolving this issue. Now, I had given them the 3 solutions to the problem. One was to blow the building down. The second one was to storm the building. And the third one, which is what I recommended, was to negotiate a way out of this. Because to adopt the other 2 situations would have created a lot of bloodshed.
But I understand that Special Forces was willing, ready and able under the watch of Major Barry Thomas to carry out that exercise.
Yes. Well, don't forget, we had different plans being organized. Right? And you are quite right. The Special Forces were by then all of them were mustered in Camp out there. And what we didn't know were where all the entrances and exits to the Red House. We wanted to know how we could get into there. And we had a military draftsman. And as I said, the acting president used to be the chief clerk in the Senate for I don't know how many years, since independence. And he knew every entrance, even the entrances that the public wouldn't normally use. So he was able to, with the help of this military draftsman, to make a sketch of the Red House building and all the entrances. So we knew that if we had to get into the building, we knew exactly what we would do. And there are other issues which I wouldn't want to bring up here, means of how we could have gotten into there.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and we are speaking with retired Major General Ralph Brown, and he's giving his account of his troops' response to the attempted coup in 1990.
Yeah. So the special forces, you're quite right. We had a mock-up of the Red House, and Barry Thomas, and I think there was an officer there, not Philip, Archie Phillips.
Right.
With two of them, and then the forces were there, and they were working on the tactics together with Major Derrick, who was the operations officer, and they were handling that aspect of things. So as I said, the three options: one was to blow the place down, the second one was to storm the building, and the third one, which is one I recommended, was to negotiate a way out of this. Because the other two, believe you me, Garth and Natasha, there would have been a lot of blood spilled. There were 114 of the Jamaat alone. All of them would have died. No doubt in my mind. How many of the hostages? Well, at one stage there might have been more than 100 hostages in both locations. How many of them we would have been able to save? I don't know. We ourselves, as a soldier, you would know, we could have lost one or two.
Of course.
Right? But if we were prepared to do any of those three things.
Well, as former minister, then Jennifer Johnson, she, and who the public will hear from in coming broadcasts, she told us that they were made to kneel, and because the Jamaat was preparing for that storm of the Red House, and everybody had a rifle to their head, that they told them once they started, they said the Jamaat told them that the first signal would be the lights being cut. And then they say once the lights get cut, then shoot everybody in the head. Right. So they were prepared.
Yeah, so there you go. So all the hostages.
So you made a good call.
Majority of hostages would have died.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as I said, that's a lot of blood, and that would have been on my conscience for the rest of my life. I was head of the army. I had to make that decision. So anyhow, Clive Panton came to me and said that some of the ministers didn't think this negotiation thing was going to work. Mm. And I do like I'm doing now. You notice I'm taking my wallet out. And in my wallet here, I still have it. Some 30-something years ago, I was trained in hostage negotiations in Canada.
Right.
By Dr. Harvey Schlossberg, who undoubtedly was probably the world's leading foremost expert on hostage negotiations. And I did a course with him at RCMP in college in Ottawa in 1986. So you're talking 34 years ago. And at the end of the course, he gave us each his business card. And he said, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you need advice, give me a call. So when Minister Panton came to me, I went into my wallet, as I'm doing now. I have his card right here. I can show it to you. And I called him. I'm not sure he's alive. You're talking a long time ago now. But at the time he was alive. That was just 4 years after I had done the course. And lo and behold, he was viewing it on CNN. By then CNN also had come in. How they got here, I don't know. But CNN was here, and he was actually viewing snippets of it on CNN, on the broadcast in CNN. And I said to him, do you remember me? And he said, yes, how can I forget you? You were you were the only non-white person on the course. And we had a good chuckle at that. And he convinced me, he said to me, look, no problem. From what I am seeing, this thing is being handled correctly. It's only a matter of time and they're going to surrender. Right? Because, by now we're talking, this was Saturday night into Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. And so I asked him if he would speak with the Minister Panton. So I put Minister Panton on the phone, and he and Minister Panton spoke. And he convinced Minister Panton that we had adopted the correct stand. And everything would work out. Minister Panton went back to his colleagues, and he would have told them what Dr. Schlossberg had told him. And I think thereafter, there was no pressure on myself to do other than the negotiation.
So actually, what you're saying here then for the listening audience, that the ministers, some of them were in favor of storming the building.
I didn't say that.
Well, they weren't convinced that the negotiation...
But they only would...
No, but I understand what God is saying. Yeah. I am not going to say that
they wanted to bring it to
they wanted to bring it to an end.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you as much. One minister actually said to me, do what I have to do.
Right. The final option.
Meaning that if it meant storming the building and One minister told me that, and I wouldn't call any names. I wouldn't embarrass anybody. But so anyhow, so this thing dragged on and on and on, and people went back and forth. And there was a lot of pressure. There was a lot of pressure. Having said that, there was a lot of pressure on the ministers outside.
Yes.
Because Abu Bakr had been on the television saying this thing could be easy. They have an amnesty. Because that was one of the documents, the two documents that Dr. Nolly Clark brought out of the Red House with him. Yeah. And he also brought Minister Dukaran and Minister Devines. Devines had been shot, his heel had been shot off, and he bled to death. He didn't die in the Red House, but he was brought out and he died. Subsequently died a few hours after that, taking him to hospital. Right? And so this thing dragged on for 6 days, and eventually they surrendered. They insisted on coming out with their arms, and listen to this. They wanted to come. One of the things were that they would come out of the Red House and the TTT with their arms, allowed to come out with their arms, go back to the mosque, pray, lay down their arms, and then the army can come and collect the weapons.
Madness.
And that was one of the suggestions. Another suggestion was that they form part of a government, and I still remember hearing Abu Bakr on the television saying they would have elections within 90 days, free from fear and free and fair and free from fear. And but he wanted to be Minister of National Security. He wanted to be my boss, actually. But I would have none of that. And as I said, they surrendered. I was not a party, neither was Brigadier Theodore a party to any discussion to have an amnesty, to offer an amnesty. Even though I heard when Canon Nolly Clark came out, he spoke a word, and from the time I heard the word amnesty, I withdrew myself and I left, because I well remember the mutiny, and the mutiny of 1970, which you carried so effectively earlier this year, where the plea of condonation was used.
Yes.
And condonation in the military is akin to amnesty in civil life. And to this day, I cannot understand how, in heaven's name, that the Privy Council could hold that the amnesty originally was valid. They invalidated the amnesty by making further demands on the government. However, they ought not to be charged again for treason. Now that baffles
many people. Many.
On the one hand, you're saying it was valid, they invalidated it, but then they ought not to be rearrested. And the only conclusion I can arrive at is that Britain had abolished the death penalty, and the penalty for treason, the only penalty for treason is death.
Yep.
So having accepted an amnesty suggests that you've done what you alleged to have done.
Yes. Yes.
So that they would have been, but I have no problem. I accepted the verdict of the Privy Council because that's the system of governance that we operate under, and I think it's the best in the world. And if that's the decision, well then so be it.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and we are having a step-by-step account of the regiment's role under the watch of Major General Ralph Brown, who is now retired, but he has agreed to join us in studio here to tell us of that experience. And we have footage of course of that, the surrender and all that. We'll show you in a while. And of course some footage from in and around the action that some of you, so all you youngsters who weren't born yet, you will get a chance to see. And we have more footage to show you as this series continue, so look out for that. Yes.
In your mind, you are soldier,
born, bred and caked. You're prepared for this.
General. Hope you enjoyed what he had to say.
Coming up, you felt that your troops did well.
We have that precision drill display to show you.
Earlier tonight,
this is our send-off to
officers, all the officers in the regiment.
After which we take your calls.
Well-trained officers.
And then we discussed
They're
the
all
three
trained
options
abroad
he gave us.
before they're made officers.
And it's not like...
And they do subsequent
Ladies-
training,
ladies and
advanced training, and I am proud of every single soldier. All the soldiers, to a man but one.
Yes, sir, in the
responded.
military, sounds
we didn't
like
even have to call them in.
no blabbermouth,
They
no
all
gallery,
responded for duty.
no wasting
Many of
people's
those
precious
them came
time
to camp out then.
with-
And as I
with
said, we broke into
rhetoric
lockers and got
self-aggrandizement.
and
had we not done
self-aggrandizement. And he was patient because you heard these guys were prepared. Remember, it's Libya, they trained them.
Yes.
So they know the sign of a storm. When I say a storm, they know the sign of a breach.
Yes.
The first thing they would do is take off the lights. So they were ready, and they were going to kill every hostage in that Red House.
Yep.
This rail officer said, no, we're not going to do that. So it couldn't end in 7 minutes. Okay, that is why it took 7 days.
Correct.
And nowhere in the world, as a matter of fact, let me put this out there on record. No officer cadet, none, whether here, England, or anywhere else, will be put in the line of fire.
Correct.
The most they will get is a weapon with a bottle of water and a pickaxe handle. That's it. They would not be given any weapon to go and quell nothing. So what you've been hearing was just plain foolishness. And then the disrespect that this Major General got, that still bothers me today.
Yes.
As a pride soldier, I didn't train Sandhurst and like this person, like them train St. Anne's, because, you know, it's sad to know that, you know, like I said, I shouldn't have any love for this Major General. He discharged me because when Colonel Salandi took the discharge papers up to him, he signed it, and I was gone from the military. I could have him on for that up to this day. No, I don't, because he didn't give me an order to use drugs, and then I was discharged. So I wouldn't come out here now and badmouth him. He was a true soldier. He was a mentor, and he prepared me for the life ahead of the military. He, and again, let me mention, you heard Derek and Alfonso, who was a Tetron at the time, Salandi, Alexander, Theodore, Antoine, Dalip, Anthony Philip Spencer, Archie Philip, Dylan, Bishop, Clark, Vidal, Joseph, Major Thomas. All of these people were the officers and Williams, and so we grew up under them, and they respected themselves, and we respected them. And you will never hear them behave in such Warahun behavior in public, ever. So you can't corner the... You hear how analytical he was?
Yep.
And
dispassionate
and, yes.
and ever the diplomat, because
Yes.
he could have called names of politicians who, you know, said and did things that, you know, he may not have agreed with. But, you know, we are so grateful and we are so lucky that he was the man in charge of the regiment at the time this happened.
Yes.
Because had it been someone else,
we would have finished in 7 minutes. With plenty blood and dead bodies
you
to pile up.
understand? It could have been much worse than it was.
No, this is what real leaders do. He had 3 options, and he took the final one, which was to, you know, negotiate.
And again, as a reminder, that clip that you just heard was first broadcast in August of 2020. As when the Major General would have come in studio to have this conversation as we were starting our 1990 series.
So, Chopin, let's go to that precision drill now. Or you want to go let's go straight to it. This is the send-off for the Major General, after which we'll take a break and come back with your calls, all right? So, those of you who took part in this drill, any soldier or police officer or fire, anybody from the protective service, this is our send-off for the Major General with a combined precision drill display. Let's go.
I'm looking forward to this. It's 85 persons.
So the team comprises 85 persons from all the formations. They would be dressed in the uniforms that were traditionally used by the various services. And here we have the commencement of the display. And it's important to remember that every single movement being performed is occurring without any words of command.
So I think I want us to sit back and look at this themselves. More than 2,000 movements.
music sweet. Oh na na na, the one who invented music got to be terrific, got to be the one who created the sun and the trees, rivers and seas. So talk for my sweet Caribbean breeze. Feel the love when the wind start blow to the leaves. Nobody leaves with a no. Stay high, beg to come back. Please tourists all over the world feel naturalistic. In a place that's so simplistic, but the culture so damn eccentric. And with the scars that we show from history, is a mix of the world that define it. But it's a next kind of beat that we beat it. And our strength to be bands and feet it. Thank God we can tell this story. And now we live see the joy and glory. Through the songs of soca that feel we. Now everybody sing it out in a big train.
If you cut me, you go see blood. And if you squeeze me, you go feel the love. We are one people under the sun. One nation under the law. So who feel the black? Who feel the white? I don't know. But it's not till tomorrow night to feel the wrong. Who feel the right? Come and go. And all who feel it too bright, bright, bright. Let me jump up, let me wind up, party non-stop. Ramage we come to play mass. Every creed and class, don't let nothing pass. Like a ready to all the love inside your way. If you cut me, you go see blood. And if you squeeze me, you go feel the love. We are one people under the sun. One nation under the law. We all let it go.
You're missing a nice display here.
Yeah.
But what we have going on here is remember for the Jubilee, we had that precision drill done by a combined force of servicemen and women, and they're going through their paces now. You hear how many movements, 1,000 plus or 2,000, something like that movements that they executed that morning to entertain the audience at the Queen's Park Savannah at the 60th anniversary.
Yes, this was just the other day. This was in 2022 when Trinidad and Tobago celebrated its 60th year of independence.
Yeah, I could tell you a lot of hard work went into this. Into this piece. You know, this is 11 minutes of poetry in motion. Here. You know, really wonderful. So that's what's going on. For those of you on Facebook and YouTube, we thank you very much for being a part of this journey and a part of this tribute to a patriot, an officer, and a gentleman, and who displayed that till the very end. You know. So after this, we sound the last post, take a break, and come back with reports. Of course, and you'll hear from. And I have to make a correction. It wasn't Jeremiah, but Clint Huggins. That was the person. That hostage that sting operation that the Major General also coordinated. So enjoy the rest of this display, and then you'll hear the last post afterwards.
Composers and arrangers that would have adapted these musical accompaniments that we're hearing here today. It's interesting to know that traditionally the music is arranged by serving musicians within the bands themselves. And this year's selection for the inspection was a tribute to the nation's 60th anniversary. The music tells a story of significant historical events from the time of the Declaration of Independence to the present day. And it's titled Star and Shield. It was composed by Major Kester Francis, the senior director, and he's on parade today and features the tunes God Bless Our Nation, Our Lands of Suns and Seas, The More We Are Together, I'm 95, My Army, and The Last Post, to name a few.
And while we're looking at this, we're also looking at what it is we're seeing on our screens in the retro wear. So we have individuals in short pants and poppy socks. We're also seeing some gaiters.
Yes, so those white items around the upper part of their footwear, or the boots, and the lower part of the trousers are called gaiters, and that would have been part of the original kit in years gone by. as well as the white coralline belts that you see around some of their waists. And all of these items would have actually been part of the uniforms in years gone by. The white gloves themselves, not necessarily so. That is an item used for precision drill displays like this, and you'd see that it gives a lot more visibility.
Definitely so in terms of peripheral vision, so you don't necessarily want to be looking towards what you want to see, but to be able to align your movements with that of the person next to you.
Exactly. So the instructors would use it as a technique to highlight the movements of the hands and arms.
And while we're looking at these spirited movements, and we're seeing the work that has gone into this display for Diamond Jubilee, 60 years of independence.
So these services would have been rehearsing for a considerable period of time to be able to get to this point. They would have been rehearsing since earlier in this year, last month. The team would have been brought together and taken off any other duties to focus on being able to present the spectacle that we see unfolding before us here now.
And once again, listening to the message of the music as it ties into the actions of the precision drill. So much has taken place during this pandemic, but at the same time, life is still here for many of us, and that is being celebrated here at the Queen's Park Savannah this Independence morning.
Exactly, and the musical composition and the drill display, they're all intended to highlight that light at the end of the tunnel and that emergence from that national trial that would have been the pandemic.
And once again, we're seeing members of representing the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, the police service, the fire service, prison service, as well as the TNT Cadet Force.
All working together, persons from many different organizations working together in unison towards presenting this spectacle here for us today.
And now I see we have a little, in the same way we have the visit of Prime Minister Holness, we also had a little interlude from Barbados, Gabby, with boots. And these are these items of music inviting this sense of nostalgia. This one here by Explainer showing sharing some of those energies that are present in Trinidad and Tobago and specific times that we want to be here.
And certainly the music was selectively identified to convey exactly that. You know, we have a lot of historic pieces that would have been adapted by the musical bands and that are actually being played on parade for the inspection or for the march past, etc. And it takes the discerning ear to be able to pick it out. But certainly we have a musical culture and people are very appreciative of all of the effort that would have gone into that side of it as well.
365 days I say, God is actually, God is actually, from Sando to Togo, from Port and Spain to Piaco, God is actually, all inside that Tobago, from Bacolod to the Scarborough.
So we have the precision drill team having performed the precision drill that they would have been rehearsing for the past month plus. They've now come around the parade square and are approaching Her Excellency to accord her that highest respect and to perform the eyes right and salute her as they march past.
And once again, looking at the work that would have gone into this is a group of 85 persons, and they commenced training on this routine July 18 of this year. And we're seeing the armed version, the armed cohort in front as well as the unarmed behind them. And we have ages ranging from 15 years to 47.
Of military precision and skill. Performing the fancy drills were our young members of the TNT Cadet Force, Lance Corporal Rene Felix, Private Kyra Kutam, and Private Patrick Symphony of the 5th Battalion of the Cadet Force. All movements seen here today were under the tutelage of 6286 Petty Officer Thurston Allen, Coast Guard.
combined forces display that we decided to give the Major General a nice send-off with this display. Thank you, sir, for your service. Thank you to the Brown family.
Yes.
And everyone else who, for lending him to us for all these years, and to Trinidad and Tobago. So let's go to the last post. Shortman, please go ahead. We will pay our respects in studio here, and then we take your calls.
All right, so that was the last post. Again, a re-edited video with some more pictures. And I have to say thanks to the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force for the collage that you just saw there, and as well to TTT for that, the recording of the precision drill display.
So this afternoon, there will be viewing at the Belgrove Funeral Home in Tagarigua.
Yes.
From
3:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. A public viewing of the Major General at Belgrove's Funeral Home in Tacarigua.
Right. So before we take your call, let's go to what one soldier had to say about working with the Major General and his experience, and then we'll take your calls. I cannot help but have, real nostalgia looking at this display and listening to his voice, and it just took me back to Tetron when we trained.
Yep.
Like I said, that's something no soldier worth his salt will ever forget. Let's go to that clip, sure.
My first encounter with the Major General was working in Camp Ogden in the audio room. And of course, I'm pretty sure most people who know him will not forget the way boy is pronounced. When he says, boy, the General, he was a very good commanding officer. We had good times in the audio room. From there, he moved on to CO TTR and moved up to Chief of Defense Staff. That will be my next encounter with him. Major General Brown, as the Chief of Defense Staff, I haven't completed one of the toughest courses I did in the military, that commando course. And at the end of the course, graduation night, come to congratulate all the participants, all the successful participants. He looked at me and said, "But I thought you was an office man. Well done, boy. Well done." Fast forward to 1994. Early 1994, we had to perform another stage of national duty and sacrifice. One which have turned my life upside down, inside out, left and right. But all with the guidance of Major General Brown. When it got to his desk, and I was standing in front of him, he gave me free rein to do what I want, say what I want, get the job done. whenever I'm on the island, I will always go look for him. It's hurting to know that Major General is gone so soon. So soon.
Yeah. Thank you, sir, too, for your service. I know it changed your life right around too as well, because you had to leave, and for his protection and his family. But again, Trinidad and Tobago, this was an era of soldiers that all soldiers will tell you they had reasons for doing things. Everything in the military was a reason, and there's discussion now about going back to grey and blue, and I would suggest the same thing for the military. Go back to army greens. Yes. You see, even though they could sell army greens and grey and blue, but we have to find a way to to counteract what's happening, and there were certain things that they had in the military that never changed back then. You see, muster parade at 0630, dress working order, and your boots well pulled, and your clothes real sharp, your kit real sharp, and you could get check on that simple muster parade. You could get check and end up doing a day or two, or getting show clean to show up at guard in the evening, the guard monk in the evening. Them fellas didn't play. They at any point day or night, they could have dropped it on your camp. They were very, very, and I think that, and this is our humble opinion, it having people dressed in greens and grey and blue, there was a certain reason to. Mm-hmm. You see, when you walk in the road, you walk the road in a certain way. But in tactical gear is relaxed gear. And I think the tactical gear should be limited to the people who doing operations in special units. But the ordinary, and you shouldn't see them at all. Anytime you see them, you're in trouble. You know that. Once you see men in tactical gear show up, you know something really drastically wrong. Yes. But so these are men you shouldn't see. And I know in our time, you get caught with camouflage, you're doing this. You got to give a good reason why you have on even your bush jacket. Some men doing guard in the night might pull out their bush jacket and put it on because they're cold and kind of thing. You better let nobody who will question that. Some men get arrested for wearing camouflage in army. You are telling you? So, no, they were real strict. And I don't know what obtains today, but I could speak for then. These gentlemen...
Well, what obtains today, God, is that we see soldiers and police walking in the road in camouflage. Normal. And as I agree with you, as you say, from the time you see a soldier or other law enforcement personnel in camouflage, you're not where you're supposed to be.
Even civilian clothes. When a soldier walking the road, you could have tell the difference between a soldier and a civilian.
Yes, by the way they carry themselves.
The way they step on it. I remember when I just passed out, I find people who walk too slow in town. I started walking the road because walking on Frederick Street was a pain for me. Because we had certain instructors that you feel even when they're around, they were still watching you. We can take your calls at 62397 as we come close to the end of our Dependency. No, I'm telling you, these men were so dread that you feel even when they weren't around, they would still find a way to find you and see what you're doing wrong to pull you up.
Yeah, I feel too like the sales of kiwi and honey and them things like that going out of the window, because I remember growing up as a child with my brother in the army, the smell of honey and kiwi was all over my house. I couldn't get. I think I hated ironing because of my brother, because he was always pressing his kit and shining his boots because that was the standard that applied back then. But as you say, God, no,
it was for a reason. It was for a reason. Everything was done for a reason, and that, you see, it must separate. Man, you need to find yourself in camp at 6:30, and if you cannot make that muster parade, you need to give a very good account of why you missed that muster parade. It was serious. It was very, very, very serious, and I really thank them for instilling that discipline in us, and that love for country. And if a call go out tomorrow for retired soldiers to return to camp, you'll have more retired soldiers in camp than civil members. I guarantee you that.
I feel
Hello,
so.
good morning.
Yes, morning, Natasha.
Good morning.
Is there really, emotional time to be calling on this program dealing with Major General Ralph Brown, someone who in 1979 when I joined the regiment, played an integral part in my career, I must say that. Even the contribution you have made, not only in the military, but in football.
Yes. Thank you for reminding me.
Yes.
Yes.
We just, now continue, we just got a message from Curtis Morrell, and I'm sure that name would ring a bell to you, right?
That's right.
That Curtis Morrell, one of the footballers who grew up under Ralph Brown with Kenny Lai, and I mean, too many names to call.
Ron Laffery, don't forget the Lafferys and
the Laffery brothers,
Laffery and Len Laffery, who
Mike
passed.
Rambo Gibbs.
So I am someone who was involved in terms of one of the spectators, who even before I joined, we used to go to PSC and always have a love of seeing the regiment in those days played, and the way they played, the confidence they used to display. People like Charlie Spooner and all those guys, and the Joseph brothers, and it could go on and go on. But all I want to say is condolences to the Brown family. Tomorrow we have to go out, all soldiers who is around and able-bodied, to go out to St. Church here, the All Saints Church, just next to the U.S. Embassy, and let us give him a grand send-off. He was a colorful kind of career he had. He's a one always ball boy, cat boy, Billy boy. That is how he always really nice officer, and he was always approachable too. And he was for the subordinates, his other junior ranks. You could have gone to him anytime. I remember us traveling to the United States, and I had some problem with my visa, and he is the one who advised me and sent me with a letter to the U.S. Embassy. So he's a man I will be dearly missed, and I know that some guys there's some of them is in Tobago now. They are the veterans that's go and visit him in Lambo. So I don't know if you're aware he was living in Tobago for the last few years.
Yes, we stayed in touch with him.
I just want to say on behalf of my family, and I mean all the people in the regiment who really will miss him a lot, and let his family know that thanks for lending him for so many years. Right, as you articulated in your program this morning, the roles he played in those two insurrections, and he showed good leadership skills, and he was at the forefront in all those battles. And I just want to say, tomorrow we must go and support.
Yes.
Right, Major General Ralph Brown and his final parade. Thank you very much for taking my call. You and your wife have a safe journey back.
Yeah, I want to say hello to my batch too. Our anniversary starts 14th of April 1982 was when I joined the regiment, and it's so ironic that this is the month that this man decided to leave. But
I was in primary school, yes. But before we continue, I just want to mention a comment here on YouTube from Jared Jacobs, who says that Major General Brown was one of the first responders at the Caridoc blast as well. And that incident, he took charge. So yes,
right.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, and to Curtis Morrell out there in Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you for tuning in, my friend, and to all of you from that football team. I remember on the national team at one time comprised of 10 players from the Defense Force under Ralph Brown. 10.
Yeah, I never stopped hearing about that.
Yeah. That time.
Good morning.
Yes, it was. Good morning.
I know you are so. Hold on, I'm just show you.
Excuse me?
Somebody just turned
on your radio. Yeah.
Right. Saying that I know how enthusiastic you are about the military. But first of all, I want to engage Natasha.
Yes,
right?
sir.
This is what I heard from you today for the first time. That you grew up in a military.
No, not a military household. My brother was in the military when I was.
Keep in mind there are other people waiting to call us.
All right, fine. Thanks, that. And is it that from that circle or affiliation with your brother is that what attracted you to God based on how he approached you and so on? 1, 2, God questions for you. This concern about and for you. The motto, if I should use the motto, on the theme of independency, we are not just here to tell stories, but also to save lives. And my question in that regard is, as much as we will be paying respect to former Major General Ralph Brown in terms of not just sharing or telling stories, but saving lives for the general information or edification. How much is this episode of the program designed to save lives as compared to just telling stories?
Hello, good morning.
Pleasant, good morning, God.
Give me strength, Jesus. Good morning.
Yeah.
Morning.
How are you? This is smart talking.
Yes, I'm smart.
Yeah, my contribution, I like to say that Major General Ralph Brown has done wonderfully well. I mean, in spite of certain things that within the military and things he didn't get to sort out, but he's done well and he'll be missed. In addition to that, any senior officer listening, such as Brigadier Peter Joseph or any senior others, if they could do something about the disability pensions. You understand? There are a lot of soldiers going through a lot of hard time with the pension money and that kind of thing. Right? You could have an increase on it because it's really, really tough. You know?
Okay. We are paying tribute to Major General, retired and now deceased, Ralph Brown. Good morning.
Good morning, Gata Natasha. How are you going?
Morning. Fine, thanks.
Morning.
This is Mr. Toronto here.
Yeah.
I knew him before, but the first time I ever met him and talked to him, I came into Trinidad and Tobago and asked me where I want to go. So I said I want to go down in the army. Right? I had some things I had to deal with. So I was at Crow's Nest. And he used to come every single day to check to see how I was doing. And he was a person he could talk to. He said, you're being treated good here. And I'll never, ever forget that. You know, he and his wife used to come down, they used to make sure check. Even when he's going back, when he finished work, he come in, check me. On weekends, he just checked in to make sure everything okay. And I very appreciate that. And he will be missed. I never forget how he used to talk to you, very like a down-to-earth person. So that, to me, that is an officer and a gentleman. You said it before, and I will say it again, that's an officer and a gentleman. To the rest in peace, you did great for your country. I'm proud of you. All my family know you, all. And you know that, God, you know who you know who in my family, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm good. Afternoon.
Morning. It's an afternoon yet.
Morning. I'm listening to the Ralph Brown. I mean, he was giving his story, his life as a military soldier. He was a soldier. To know he was studying abroad and to get the feeling that something taking place in the country and give up his life to come across to defend his country, that is of a soldier. Today I see some soldiers, I just ask myself if they're really able to fight a war, you know. Because I say some of them join the service because it is a form of employment. They get money. And there are some who never have subjects, but they will make up their mind to fight for their country. And God, I'm sorry to hear that what you went through back in your days. After you wasn't still in the army, you know, you'd be a good leader.
He would have been, absolutely. He would have
Thank you, sir.
risen to the rank of officer, I'm sure.
Thank you for that.
Gata Natasha.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Let me start off condolences. This is a very serious program, people. Condolences to the Ralph Brown and the contribution that he have made to Trinidad and Tobago. And God, thanks for you and Natasha. And this program is one of the best. I don't know what missed this interview, God. I think that you all should play over this again. What was told to me here is that you do not put people in sensitive positions who have a complex and an ego. When the U.S. tried to wring his hand orally and verbally, what help they was talking about? And then in another instance with the former ministers, that he told them there's 3 options. And what that told me again, Natasha and God, is that you are a human being first. And he said if he had to take the other two options, a lot of lives would have been lost. So this again is just a reminder of the strength. God has hardly make them like this anymore, God.
Yeah,
because
of course.
What this has told us is that we must know where we came from as Trinbagonians. We must put people in positions, as I say, without an inferior complex, and understand that this was a backwater society, and that you are not just easily influenced by anybody whispering in your ears. So let's end by saying he will be sent off tomorrow in a very, very nice way.
Yes.
And this is another example that you are a human being first before any other.
Thank you very much, Neil.
Attended.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that's where we have to leave it, because Major News is up next at 12 with Janelle Wilson. We thank you all so much for joining us on this journey. We really appreciate all your comments. And those of you who joined late, remember you can return to the page after we're done, and you can take it in from the beginning of this journey. Rest in peace, Major General Ralph Brown. Condolences to his family.
Indeed.
True patriot, true soldier, and one I was proud to serve under. So, we leave you for another Sunday. Please be safe out there. Please take care. Major News up next with Janelle Wilson.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.